Welcome to Echo of Crime YouTube channel. It started with a flicker, one line of unexplained data leaving an airport server in the middle of the night. At first, no one noticed. To most systems engineers, it looked like routine network noise, packets of harmless data bouncing between maintenance terminals. But inside one of the world's busiest international airports, that flicker was the beginning of a breach that would shake global aviation security. The first signs came in February 2019, when a network monitor at JFK International Airport Cybersecurity Unit logged a data spike in the employee access system. The anomaly lasted less than 3 seconds, transferring roughly 40 megabytes of encrypted files to an external IP. The system flagged it as a minor irregularity, nothing worth waking anyone over. But over the next month, similar irregularities began showing up at other airports. Chicago O'Hare, Heathrow in London, and Lisbon Portela. Different countries, different networks, same data signature. In the world of digital security, few things are more dangerous than silence. A good hacker doesn't crash systems, they blend in. This one moved like a ghost, hiding behind outdated encryption keys, exploiting forgotten accounts, and masking his presence behind VPNs layered like onion skin. When the investigation finally began, specialists from Europol and the FBI noticed something chilling. Each airport breach followed the same entry pattern. An old subcontractor's login credentials still active in the system. The login name was simple, E.Mercer. At first, they thought it was a coincidence, maybe an old file, a system ghost. But then someone on the Interpol cyber team recognized the name, Elias Mercer, a 32-year-old freelance technician who had once worked for a private security firm contracted to multiple airports across Europe. A contractor who had been let go 2 years earlier after disagreements over pay. When investigators looked deeper, they discovered Elias's access permissions had never been fully revoked. He was still inside their systems, quietly downloading surveillance blueprints, access logs, and airport security manuals. In his small Lisbon apartment, Elias lived a life that could only be described as invisible. His neighbors barely knew him. He rarely went out. His days were spent behind 3 monitors, each displaying lines of code and endless scrolling data. To him, hacking wasn't rebellion. It was curiosity turned into obsession. After losing his job, Elias began experimenting with the old VPN keys he'd been assigned. He found that several servers were still reachable, no firewalls updated, no access revoked. He wasn't stealing passwords or planting malware. He was simply walking through open doors no one had locked. But the temptation to see what lay beyond was too strong. One night, he downloaded an archive of airport floor plans, employee access rosters, and surveillance camera layouts. It was all there, years of data forgotten by a bureaucracy that assumed its digital walls were impenetrable. Elias told himself he'd never use it. He just wanted to know he could. But like all curiosity, it grew. He began visiting darknet forums, anonymous boards where hackers discussed exploits, shared vulnerabilities, and occasionally bought or sold stolen data. That's where he first saw the demand. Buyers offering Bitcoin for airport entry systems or restricted infrastructure schematics. He watched for weeks before posting his first message under the alias 0-Day Saint. It read simply, verified access data from multiple EU airport networks, employee credentials, security layouts, serious buyers only, BTC only. The post went viral overnight on dark web channels. Within hours, he received dozens of messages, not just from small-time hackers, but from organized buyers offering large sums. Some claimed to be data brokers, others government-linked collectors. Elias didn't know who they were, and he didn't care. The thrill of being wanted again consumed him. He began selling small pieces, user lists, camera coordinates, even archived access logs. Each sale brought in a few thousand euros, transferred discreetly through crypto mixers. To Elias, it felt like justice, revenge on the corporations that had discarded him without a second thought. He didn't realize he was already on a watch list. By mid-2019, cyber intelligence teams noticed something strange. Files stolen from different airports were showing up under the same encryption signature. the digital equivalent of a fingerprint. They called it Echo Key. It was a distinctive code pattern created by Elias's self-written compression script, a small oversight that exposed his unique identity. From that point, investigators began quietly mapping his movements. They traced Bitcoin transactions to accounts hosted on offshore crypto platforms. They followed the trail of metadata from his darknet messages, even through VPNs and Tor routers. He thought he was anonymous. He wasn't. Interpol's Cybercrime division launched Operation Flightlock, a joint task force between the US, Portugal, and the UK. Their mission was simple: track the hackers selling global airport secrets before a buyer used the data for something worse. But time was running out, because Elias was already negotiating his biggest sale yet: complete airport network access for one of Europe's busiest terminals. The deeper investigators dug, the clearer one thing became. This wasn't a coordinated cyber attack. It wasn't a foreign government or a syndicate. It was one man sitting in a one-bedroom apartment in Lisbon, selling the keys to global airport security from the glow of a laptop screen. By the time Interpol launched Operation Flightlock, Elias Mercer, known online as Zero Day Saint, had already built a reputation on darknet forums. His listings were polished, almost professional. He used terms like accessed verification logs, restricted blueprints, and security credential batches. He even offered update packages for returning buyers. To the casual observer, it looked like tech support. To experts, it was espionage for sale. In the hidden marketplaces of the dark web, Elias's uploads became digital gold. For every stolen file, there was someone willing to pay, sometimes for curiosity, sometimes for power. Airport design blueprints sold for 2,000 euros. Camera network schematics went for 5,000 euros. Employee access credentials fetched even more. Elias didn't just upload files, he tested them, logging into systems in real time to prove authenticity. In one chilling instance, he streamed live footage from a security camera inside a restricted baggage zone, blurring faces but proving his access was real. Buyers believed him instantly. Meanwhile, investigators were watching. Interpol's Cyber Operations Unit in Lyon, France, had been quietly monitoring one of the dark websites where Elias sold his data. Every time he logged in, they recorded his timestamps. Each file upload carried traces of his digital signature, tiny remnants of metadata embedded in the code. It was enough to start narrowing down their suspect's physical location. The breakthrough came from something simple: time zones. Elias's listings always appeared between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. Lisbon time, consistent with a late-night working pattern. By August 2019, they had his city. They just needed his door. Elias had grown comfortable, maybe even arrogant. For months, he had used encrypted cryptocurrency mixers to launder his payments. But one transaction broke the pattern. He transferred 4,800 euros to a smaller exchange that required minimal identity verification, but still logged IP connections for internal security. That one log entry, traced through multiple VPN layers, landed in Lisbon's Bairro Alto district. Investigators began monitoring local internet traffic for unusual data routing behavior. Within days, they identified a Wi-Fi signal broadcasting under the name or ion link, the same codename Elias used in his Python scripts. A surveillance van parked across the street from his apartment for a week. From the outside, it was a typical Lisbon building: peeling paint, quiet tenants, and a narrow balcony cluttered with computer cables and drying laundry. Inside, Elias was finalizing what he called his last sale. He had packaged full airport access credentials, firewall passkeys, and 3D security layouts, worth nearly 100,000 euros on the darknet. He didn't know that every keystroke he typed was being mirrored by agents watching in real time. The arrest had to be quiet. Interpol, Europol, and Portugal's PJ Policia Judiciaria coordinated a late-night entry. The risk wasn't that Elias would resist. It was that he might wipe his drives before they reached him. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the team entered the building. Two plainclothes officers climbed the stairwell, while another disabled the power grid to the floor. When they breached the apartment, Elias was still at his desk, headphones on, eyes locked on a terminal filled with scrolling code. He looked up, startled, as flashlights swept across his walls. Walls lined with monitors showing security feeds from airports he'd never visited. There was no fight. He simply leaned back in his chair, removed his headphones, and said quietly, "You finally found me." The operation took less than 5 minutes. But for the cybersecurity world, it was the end of an 18-month investigation that spanned 3 continents. Investigators collected 5 laptops, 3 external drives, and several encrypted USB sticks. Inside, they found folders labeled contracts, blueprints, and log dumps. Each contained thousands of documents, detailed security maps, personnel databases, even biometric checkpoint algorithms. The data was terrifyingly precise. In one file, a complete model of a terminal's baggage routing system showed how a simple software glitch could override access permissions. It wasn't a plan to attack, it was proof of how fragile global systems had become. Elias never denied what he did. When agents asked him why, he answered calmly, "I just wanted to show them how broken their walls were." But no one pays attention until the walls fall. To investigators, it was both confession and prophecy. The aftermath of exposure. News broke days later. Headlines across Europe read, "Hackers sold airport secrets on the dark web." Former technician accused of compromising global aviation networks. Publicly, authorities downplayed the breach, assuring passengers that no flights or operations were endangered. Privately, however, the fallout was massive. Airports across Europe were forced to reset their internal systems, update cybersecurity protocols, and revoke thousands of access credentials. Some experts called it the largest data reconstruction in European aviation history. But one thing was undeniable. The system had failed long before Elias started selling. He had simply exposed it. The courtroom in Lisbon was unusually quiet that morning. No shouting, no flashing cameras. Just a line of reporters outside the glass doors and a few tired officials sitting under the pale fluorescent lights. At the center of it all sat Elias Mercer, the man who had sold the world's airport secrets. Not a criminal mastermind, not a political extremist, but a former IT contractor who had learned just how fragile trust could be in the digital age. He looked smaller than his legend, clean-shaven, wearing a plain gray shirt, his hands folded neatly on the table. He wasn't defiant, nor was he afraid. He was calm, the same quiet composure he'd shown when the agents walked into his apartment months earlier. The prosecutor read through the charges: unauthorized access to protected systems, distribution of restricted infrastructure data, sale of national security information to third parties. It sounded like a script from a movie, but this was real, and everyone in the room knew it. As the trial unfolded, a strange contradiction emerged. Elias had never once tried to sabotage or damage an airport system. He hadn't erased data, planted malware, or interfered with flights. His crime was selling access, exposing how easily it could be done. Digital forensics experts testified that Mercer had bypassed dozens of international networks, using nothing more than old VPN credentials and default passwords. He hadn't broken through firewalls. He'd simply found the keys that no one bothered to collect after years of neglect. It wasn't genius that made him dangerous. It was negligence that made him powerful. And that, perhaps, was the most unsettling truth. When investigators presented evidence showing that several buyers had used his files to test small airport vulnerabilities, Mercer remained silent. When asked if he understood the risk his actions posed, he nodded slowly and said, "I didn't think anyone would actually use it. I just wanted to prove a point." The courtroom fell silent. For a brief moment, even the prosecutor hesitated. On June 14, 2021, the Lisbon court handed down its verdict. Elias Mercer was sentenced to 6 years in prison for cyber espionage, data theft, and the sale of protected information. The judge's statement was measured, almost reflective. "Mr. Mercer, your crime was not violence. It was ignorance disguised as discovery. The harm you caused cannot be measured in money, but in the trust you broke." Elias didn't argue. He simply lowered his head and whispered something only the guard beside him could hear. Outside the courtroom, Reporters described him as the hacker who proved no system is safe. For months afterward, cybersecurity firms across Europe cited his case in training manuals and conference slides. He had become both a cautionary tale and an unintentional teacher. Life behind bars for Elias wasn't what most expected. He spent his days in the library reading about ethical hacking, law, and cryptography. Occasionally, he helped prison staff recover lost data from old computers. There were no special privileges, just a quiet existence and a reputation that followed him like static electricity. When interviewed by a journalist 2 years later, Elias gave one of his few recorded statements. "They called me a hacker like it was a dirty word. But hacking means finding flaws. I just found too many." The interview aired for less than 5 minutes, but it sparked a broader debate about cybersecurity and responsibility. How much blame lies on the hacker, and how much on the systems that allowed him in? In the years following Mercer's arrest, airports across the globe began implementing new digital security protocols. Old accounts were deleted, access logs were rewritten, and new cybersecurity training became mandatory for staff. The cost of his actions, estimated at over 45 million euros in system overhauls, was enormous, but experts admitted it might have prevented something far worse. A cybersecurity analyst at Heathrow put it best: "He forced us to rebuild what should never have been broken in the first place." Still, not everyone saw Elias as a hero. Many considered him reckless, a man who put millions at risk for validation. His story became a mirror for both sides of the argument: those who saw hackers as innovators, and those who saw them as threats. When Elias was released on parole in 2025, he disappeared quietly. No social media, no public statement. Rumors said he moved to Finland under a different name, working as a systems analyst for a cybersecurity consultancy, ironically helping companies defend against people like his former self. For those who followed his case, one quote from his final court statement never left them: "The only reason I got in was because no one ever checked the locks." It wasn't arrogance, it was truth. And it was a truth that reshaped how governments and corporations looked at cybersecurity forever.